Hello, my pretties. I'm back with another YouTube read for everybody. Trust me when I say that nobody is more surprised than I am that I actually built up a queue with this before I start posting. Wow! This video series isn't an audiobook. If you thought that it was, please stick around and learn some reading and listening comprehension skills. Anyway, Game of Sunken Places by M.T. Anderson. I usually don't read a lot of middle school books, so we'll see. I'm of the opinion that simply because one writes for children does not mean that the book should be horrible. So yes, I will hold this to the same standard as literally anything else. Prologue. We open on a man named Milton Deatley walking through a forest. I'm pretty certain that the main character is not a real estate developer, and as soon as I realized this, my interest in him waned immensely. Yes, I am pretty sure that this will probably become relevant sooner or later, but at the same time, nobody cares about some fat guy wanting to bulldoze trees. As he goes on thinking about how to name all of the streets, he hears an unearthly scream. Milton presses on and eventually finds a rather unusual scene. It's a ski-doo on its side set ablaze. People stand around dressed in cloaks with their faces in shadow. One man has a, and I quote, mystical tablet. No, I don't know if he means an apple tablet or a carved stone thing, but the man keeps pressing squares, which kind of leads me to the opinion that it's more of the apple variety than stone. But every time that the man presses a square, a different person starts screaming. However, the way that this is described now versus earlier are two different things. Now it's more akin to singing, something along the lines of the Addams Family, rather than truly horrifying. Milton watches this for a moment before some of the people bring forward a woman who is unconscious or worse. At this point, Milton decides that this is where he's going to draw the line, so he takes off. However, he doesn't get far before a woman finds him and tells him that things won't go well for him. He keeps running, but after a moment, he realizes that he's going in the opposite way from where he'd left his car. And then he hears horses running towards him. Hunters on horseback burst up from the woods and quickly surround him. Part 1, Chapter 1. We finally get around to the actual plot, although I'm curious to see when Milton will be brought back up again. A young boy named Gregory Buchanan gets an invite from his Uncle Max to spend time up in Vermont with Max and Max's daughter, Prudence. Said invite is written in Gothic script and it has gold on it, which Gray's friend Brian questions. He's strange, Uncle Max. Gregory shook his head. Probably insane. He lives in a kind of different world from the rest of us, you know? The kind of world where electricity is a lot of invisible spiders. The kind of world where there's organ music that gets louder when he eats refined sugar. Cool. Wish I had one of those. All I got was drug addiction, Uncle. The letter says I have to bring a companion. Gregory opened up the note. Well, it says, a companion for your amusement, so long as he be of solid reputation and respectful and unspotted demeanor. This is one of those things that really only makes sense within the context of a novel. The author could have given Max a cousin around the same age that could have become fast friends or enemies, whatever. Instead, we get Prudence. Despite how odd the entire thing is, Brian obviously wants to go. After all, it's an adventure, and anything is better than hanging around the boring city where they live. The book then devolves into describing the two boys. I don't mind describing their basic appearances, especially when the compare and contrast thing between the two of them is used. Dear Lord, pretty much anything is better than the first person staring at themselves in the mirror. Anything. My problem is that the book keeps going and describes their personalities, and it's one thing to describe that they have brown hair or whatever, but the problem is don't tell us what their personalities are like. Show us by indicating how talkative that Greg is. Show us by indicating how anxious that Brian is. After this is finished, we get Mrs. Thats, Brian's mom, talking about how the mountains will be up where Uncle Max lives, which is a choice that I think would really only exist in the context of a novel. Like most parents that I know would not willingly let their child go off with a friend for a while to another state to stay with a distant relative that the friend himself barely knows. It's not weird at all. This doesn't reek of the start of an episode of Law & Order SVU. Uncle Max isn't on either side. Gregory explained he's not related. Prudence's parents, my aunt and uncle, died when she was 17 or so. Uncle Max is a good friend of my real uncle. After her parents died, Prudence went to live with him. Before that, although she traveled all over the world. Oh good, he's not actually related. This is literally the start of an episode of Law & Order SVU. Granted, he is more than simply some random stranger to Greg's family, but at the same time, I'm still giving some serious side-eye to Brian's parents for letting their child run off on this misadventure. They take the train up to the uncle's house in Vermont, all the way from Boston, and at this point I'm seriously questioning what time period that this is supposed to be set in. It doesn't matter to the actual plot, I'm only wondering because Brian reads a physical book while Greg plays handheld foosball. I don't know what that is, and I don't think it matters. The fact that neither of them take out a phone or a tablet is kind of telling. It's obviously a long ride, and by the time that it starts to get dark, the boys note that most of the other passengers have left already. But they aren't alone in their car, however. There's an odd-looking man who will not stop staring at them, and then he takes something out from his pocket. Chapter 2. The creepy man takes out a yo-yo and starts doing tricks. It's seriously the most intense yo-yo scene that I've ever read. I say like I've ever read any scenes about yo-yoing. Brian acts like this man is juggling chainsaws, however, the entire thing is a bit odd. After a while, the man gets up and starts to walk in their direction. Brian flips out and tries to get Greg's attention. The man smiles and nods at the boys before he continues on his way. Because not everybody is a serial killer who is out to get you. And I say this as somebody who has bad anxiety. Most passers-by don't actually care all that much about you. Brian tries to tell Greg about the weirdo with the, and I quote, bladed yo-yo. I'm honestly not quite sure how that would even function. Like, wouldn't the blade start cutting the string at some point? In my defense, the last time I played with a yo-yo, it was the 90s, and I was in single digits. However, Greg is quick to dismiss all of this as being fantasy. And then Greg will not shut up about, someday I want to be a shower curtain repairman. What? Is this the author's attempt to be funny and witty? Because it's honestly not. Maybe if I was a 12-year-old boy, but even then, I doubt it. However, after a moment, Brian manages to convince Greg about this. Greg is upset that he missed it, but Brian said that he hadn't wanted to draw the man's attention. A few moments later, Brian points to a man entering the snack car. There's a tedious back and forth about how people are allowed to go get food, and then Greg makes a joke about how dangerous the man would be with the slinky. It's obvious to Brian that Greg thinks that he's joking around, which obviously is pissing him off. They get off of the train and go to a nearby restaurant where we're subjected to knowing exactly what the boys ordered. Like, is knowing about your Funyuns seriously necessary to the continuation of the plot? As they're waiting, Greg looks around for his uncle. The guy who works there casually asks who they're waiting for, and then gets upset when Greg drops Max's name. He says that the boys have to get back on the train and leave right now, which, wow, buddy, don't be shy, tell us how you really feel. But then he continues on and says that some real estate developer was found dead up there, and that got dark really quickly. That presses on and gives us more missing people and unexplained deaths in the area, which I suppose is a good reason to warn a couple of literal children away from there. However, if books worked on common sense and logic, there would never be much of a story at all. So, off to Uncle Max's house, I guess. Chapter 3. The boys sit around outside and wait for Uncle Max to show up. It takes most of a page, and usually I hate scenes that drag on, but man, this really hits the nail on the head as far as the tedious boredom of waiting around for somebody. Greg picking lint off of his sweater, watching a kid go by on a trike, the boys thinking about what it would have been like before the town was founded. But finally Uncle Max shows up in a horse-drawn carriage complete with a driver, and when he comes out, he looks exactly like you'd think that somebody who intentionally drives around in a horse-drawn carriage to look like. He greets the boys, Gregory, and ushers them inside once their luggage is secure. I'm just going to take the liberty of locking the doors, said Uncle Max. It's the kind of world where sometimes if people see a carriage, they'll attempt to clamber into it. Considering what the restaurant worker said to the boys, I don't think that people clamber in for jollies. As soon as they start going, Max explains that he uses the carriage whenever they entertain, which isn't much. He indicates 10 notch marks on the window by Brian and says that each notch is for each of the guests. He adds 2 more, 1 for each boy. They ride awkwardly in silence the rest of the way. When they get to the house again, it's pretty much exactly as one might expect. It's the kind of house that you half expect to see the mystery machine parked out in front of. But then again, Max seems like the kind of guy who goes around wearing a sheet over his head to scare off the locals. The butler opens the carriage door because, of course, a man who has a carriage driver also has a butler. Max tells the boys to wear your knickerbockers and indicates he thinks their jeans are unpleasant to look at. Neither boy seems to know what knickerbockers are, but Max only chuckles and immediately leaves. They go inside, where the first thing of note is a giant painting of Max. I swear to God, I will hurt somebody if the eyes move. Max calls for Prudence, who comes down and greets the boys. She's in her early 20s, so at least there's not going to be any romance between her and Brian. Prudence wants the boys to go upstairs and change for dinner, but Max says that they should simply eat. After the boys and Prudence go into the dining room, Max turns to the butler and tells him to burn the luggage the boys brought with them. You're in danger. Thanks for listening to my book Snark on YouTube. New videos are up every Monday, but stick around because I sometimes drop random videos on other days too. Just as a reminder, even if you can't financially support me, there are other ways to help me out. The first is watching this video as well as all my other videos. It's also important to like and subscribe. Finally, you can share this video with all your friends so that they can help as well. If you're already caught up with all of my videos, you can go to Tumblr for my main book. Snark's always free and updated every morning. The only edit to Patreon is to become a member without paying. You'll get access to the same things on Tumblr, but on Patreon. Supporters can have access to so many more book snarks starting at $1 a month. Also new is a 1-week free Patreon trial, so be sure to check that out. Special thanks to Dawn and Phoebe for supporting me on Patreon already. If you want to hear your name in my video next week, either support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation. Do you like my snarks so much that you want me to snark your writing? I do that too, but not to worry if you feel like you couldn't take the criticism. I also offer regular book editing as well. You can contact me on any of my social media platforms if you have further questions about my editing services, including pricing options. If you want to read some of the things that I've written, you can purchase my works on Amazon. I have a slew of spicy short stories and 2 full-length novels. I also frequently run flash sales on my stories, and if you don't follow me on any social media, you might want to do so just so you can know when I might be offering things for free. Links for everything will be posted below. See you next week, guys!